Welcome to Diecast QT, I'm QT, and in this video I'm going to be building a 67 Chevy C10 custom hauler. I'm going to be building that from a Hot Wheels 67 Chevy C10 and a Matchbox Kenworth cab-over racing transporter. So take a look at the two castings. We've got the racing transporter, which was made by Matchbox in, I believe, 1983. And then we've got the 67 Chevy, which was a 2013 model from Hot Wheels. So 30 years apart. So we'll start by getting these apart. I'm not too bothered about the chassis for these because I'm going to be replacing them with a custom one. So drilling these out was just savage the posts off so that I could get to the casting. So taking these apart, I'm not going to be using the chassis, not going to be using the wheels, not going to be using the exhaust, not going to be using the cab window. I'm going to be using the plastic bed insert. And obviously we're using the casting or most of it. And from the Chevy, I'm not going to be using any of this. But I do like to keep the wheels separate. I'm using half of the interior, I'm using the window, and obviously half of the casting. So working out how much of each casting I'm going to be using and how much I'm going to be cutting away, I'm crudely marking it with a gold Sharpie. Then with a jeweler's saw, cutting through the gold lines. It's pretty tough metal on the Kenworth here. Actually got through two jeweler's saw blades cutting this one. And the Chevy was like cutting through butter. That was no problem at all. So now we've got the two parts. They're a good match. Just a slight bending needing on the truck casting to make it fit. Apologies for the shaky footage here. My camera is mounted to the workbench and this was quite shaky. So that's the interior of the cab. So I get the paint off now using caustic soda. So put them in a jar, drown them in boiling water. And then put in too much caustic soda.
Get out of there, it's gonna blow!
and then leave that for a couple of minutes to get the paint off. And after you rinse away all the ghastly chemicals and paint, you're left with that, which we can then clean up with a Dremel and a steel brush. And as you may notice here, I've already drilled and tapped the posts in both castings. Did that off camera because it's a little bit boring to watch. I had to build a custom chassis for the hauler because it's made up of two castings. So I used Tinkercad, having made copious measurements of what I need, and came up with a prototype which I then perfected to this one. And here's the finished piece here. Still needed filing in places to get it right. And when I did a test fit, the screw actually got stuck inside the chassis there, so that became a permanent fixture. I just need to add the axle tubes now to hold the axles and the wheels. I'll be using green light wheels to replace the ones that came with the two castings. And once they've been cut to size, we can then glue them in place. So to fill out the back of the cab there, I'm going to use a sheet of styrene, just roughly mark out the size. This part doesn't need to be too accurate because it's not even going to be visible on the finished piece, it's just to kind of close off a gap. And then make some more precise measurements to cut it to size even more. And once that's done, glue it in place. And when gluing it in place, be sure to make as many stupid mistakes as possible. So now there's the multiple attempts to get these two castings to stick together using multiple materials. Amusingly, all that tape and lolly sticks were supposed to hold the castings in place so they don't move, but as you can clearly see, they move freely. Yes. So, having had no joy with JB World for 2 attempts, I broke out the milliput and gave that a go instead. So at this stage I've decided to combine forces, and I'm going to be using a combination of superglue and JB World. So I've superglued the casting together, left that overnight, and now going in with a JB World and putting in as much of the stuff as I can feasibly manage all over the place, so there's no possible way it could fall apart. Returning to it the next day, everything seems fine. But of course now I've got too much JB World, so in with the abrasives to get rid of all of the excess. Do a test fitting, find it doesn't quite fit the chassis anymore, and then just sand the chassis lightly on the sides so we get a comfortable fit. And then just wearing down the excess JB Weld until we get a nice smooth finish on the side there. Starting off with some coarse sandpaper, probably 600 grit. Once I'm happy with that, it's time to break out the polishing pads. These start at 1600 grit and work their way all the way down to 12,000 grit. The aim being to get rid of any of the scratches in the casting. And once that's all cleaned up, we end up with a nice smooth transition between cab and bed. And we are at last ready for paint. Using some metal primer on this, which comes out white but dries grey. Between paint sessions, I designed these exhaust stacks using Tinkercad and printed them in clear resin, which I later hand painted with black, and then went over the exhaust stacks themselves with silver paint. Moving on, we've got the decals here, which I've again designed specifically for this model. Printed them on clear decal paper so that the white of the body would then fill in the required white areas on the decals. Some very fiddly bits here. Now, I only filmed myself putting the decals on this half of the model, so if you want to see the other half, I'd suggest rewinding 2 minutes 5 seconds and watching this again in a mirror. Here we have some of the extra details I've created for this piece. We've got a winch made out of a resin core wrapped with wire, a control panel, some light units for the top of the cab, and then we've got the exhaust stacks that we saw before, and we're almost ready. So we're going to put it together now. There's the finished casting, clear coated. There's the finished bed with the additional details added. The interior was just given a blast of black primer just to take away that annoying chrome. You can see the green light wheels there. Problematic final screw. Insert the bed with the clips, and we're done. Let me know in the comments what you think of this nightmare build, and thanks for watching.